Hi guys, it's me Chazza HD and welcome to this special live stream where we are going to be covering the breaking news today on this Monday that Alexander Albon is replacing Pierre Gasly at Red Bull Racing for the rest of 2019, and today we are going to look at the implications for Gasly, Albon, Kvyat, Verstappen and Red Bull and what it all means going forward. So make sure to tune in to the rest of this video because I'm going to cover it all in the next, I don't know how many minutes, and then after I do that, then I will come to you guys in the live chat and get your reaction to what I've had to say. And if you're watching this after the stream has finished, then for the live chat, just look to the right of you or to the bottom of you if you're watching on the mobile. But let's get into this news. So earlier this morning, 11 a.m. This morning, Pierre Gasly was announced to be dropped by Red Bull for Alexander Albon. Now, let's start off with why Pierre Gasly has been dropped. Now, the first, couple races weren't great. They weren't all his fault as to why they weren't great. He definitely was struggling to get used to the car. And in Australia, for example, it wasn't totally his fault. He ended up where he did. But it was not a good start for Pierre Gasly at Red Bull. And then, of course, after that, things did start to improve. He started to get closer to his teammate Max Verstappen, especially around the Spanish and Monaco Grand Prix. And it looked as though if Gasly could continue to improve like that, then maybe by this point of the year, Pierre would be on terms at times with Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. But then the first massive blow to his Red Bull career was the Canadian Grand Prix, where he was out-qualified by a Renault and then in the race was outraced by both Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg in the two Renaults. By the way, quick reminder, the Renault is at best a second a lap slower than the Red Bull car. Unacceptable to be slower than Renault in that Red Bull car, and he was lucky that Lance Stroll is just so terrible at qualifying, because if Lance Stroll had started higher, considering how great he was in that race, Lance would have beat Pierre Gasly to P8 as well. So, awful race in Canada, and that was the first massive blow to Pierre Gasly's Red Bull career for sure. And then after that, of course, we had France and Austria, where he somehow got worse in a car that was actually improving. At the French Grand Prix, for example, his home race, normally at your home Grand Prix in Formula 1, you're supposed to improve. He did not. He got worse by, half a second at least. He was awful in France. In Austria, even though his teammate had the new front wing, even though that did give Max, say, 3 or 4 tenths of a second over Gasly with that new front wing, Gasly was still miles off in a position he should not be in, racing McLarens, Alphas and Renaults, and ended up getting lapped by his teammate who went on to win the Grand Prix. Again, very, very poor. But then, of course, at Silverstone, we thought, after finishing P4 and not being that far off the podium, that maybe Pierre Gasly was now going to somehow start improving and was going to finally showcase how good he was and actually perform well in a good car. But then, of course, came the German and Hungarian Grand Prix, where he went right back to how he really is at Hockenheim. He made contact and retired with the race with the driver that's replaced him. And then in Hungary, he managed to put in his worst performance of the season, even though he's now 12 races into his Red Bull career, by qualifying almost a second off his teammate Max Verstappen and getting lapped by an absolute mile in the Grand Prix. An absolutely terrible, terrible weekend for Pierre Gasly. And then, of course, he was dropped this morning. Now, when it comes to Pierre Gasly, I have no sympathy for him whatsoever. He worked himself into this position. He thoroughly deserves to be dropped by Red Bull Racing. I cannot believe, though, that it's only been 12 races for him to show that he's not good enough to be in that car. I thought when Pierre was hired to go to Red Bull for 2019 that after, say, a couple seasons in that car, it would be proof that Pierre just isn't quite good enough to be at this level. But he was able to show us only not even 12 races in, 7 races in, that he was quite frankly not good enough. And it was the first 12 races and the only 12 races he'll ever get in a top car and a Red Bull car were absolutely terrible. He, instead of blaming himself at times, was starting to blame other things, such as the car not being to his liking. And then at Hungary, he blamed a lack of grip, even though his teammate in the same car was on pole position and was able to go for the race victory. Lack of grip, more like lack of talent, because what talent have you showed in the first 12 races of 2019? I didn't really see any. And, you know, the races like Silverstone, like, say, Monaco or Baku, those races were not what he could do, those were blips. What he could do was what he did in France, Austria, Canada, Bahrain, Hungary, Hockenheim, and has thoroughly deserved to get dropped to Toro Rosso, which he deserves to be. He deserves to be in the midfield. He's been in the midfield even though he's been in the Red Bull for the first 12 races. If you told me that the Red Bull car that Pierre was driving was actually a Toro Rosso in a Red Bull livery, I would have agreed with you. I would have said, yeah, I can believe that. And with the pace he showed, were we really wrong in saying that he was actually, really in a Toro Rosso? He was so bad, so bad. After the Hungarian Grand Prix also, Red Bull said that Pierre was going to see out the season. And then, of course, 10 days later, they went back on that. The reason they went back on that is because they started using that thing between your ears. It's called your brain. They weren't using that when they said that the first time. Now they actually thought about it over the summer break. We have time to think about things. And they thought, yeah, Pierre is never going to be good. Let's try and find a replacement and try and test out replacements to actually complement Max Verstappen and score good points for the Red Bull team. And I think definitely Alex Albon is a better fit. And I also think Daniil Kvyat is a better fit for Red Bull than Pierre Gasly is. And now Pierre, of course, goes to Toro Rosso for the final 9 races of 2019. Now, again, when he was at Red Bull, you could absolutely mistake him for being in a Toro Rosso. Hopefully now he's gone to Toro Rosso, we won't mistake him if he continues to be really poor. Hopefully we won't mistake him for being in a Minardi, of course, the team that was previous to Toro Rosso. That would be very, very embarrassing. And if Daniil does beat Gasly comfortably in the final 9 races, then I think Pierre Gasly's Formula 1 career is absolutely dead and buried 6 feet under the ground. And again, for Gasly, I have no sympathy. He deserved this. He absolutely deserved this. And to be honest, it's not a surprise that he's been dropped. Yes, Red Bull said he was not going to be dropped until 2020 at the earliest, but I think, to be honest, considering they're only, 44 points behind Ferrari, they had to make a decision because they can absolutely finish P2 in the Constructors. No doubt about it whatsoever. But they only had one good driver in the car. The other driver was not a driver that was actually doing anything in the other car. Pierre Gasly essentially so far in 2019 has been the 1993 version of Michael Andretti. Just absolutely terrible in a car that isn't great, but it's a car that should be fighting in the top 4, 5, 6 on the grid, but he wasn't capable of doing that. He absolutely was not capable of doing that. And because of his just terrible first 12 races as a Red Bull driver, and because of the fact, or not the fact, but because of the, because Daniil Kvyat for me will be better than Pierre Gasly in the final 9 races, which will just compound Gasly's career even more. I think Gasly's career as a top driver, or a driver in a top car, or in the Red Bull car, that career is absolutely over, and it can firmly rest in piss. But now let's get on to Alexander Albon, who of course is his replacement. Now, this is a surprise, but I think I do see what Red Bull are trying to do. Now, Let's first talk about Albon's 2019 so far. Now, compared to teammate Daniil Kvyat, he hasn't been as good. He has not been as good, in my opinion. He has had good races like Shanghai, where he came from the pit lane to the points. Monaco, another great race as well. You can see right there. And Hungary, where he finished in P10, doing a great move on Sergio Perez. Good race. Also, even though his teammate, took most of the plaudits, he was great at Hockenheim, even though he started almost at the very, very back of the grid. So, even though I think Daniil has been the better driver, Albon has had a good season. He has had races where he has been good. But again, I think Daniil has been the better driver. But I think the reason Red Bull are going for Albon is because they're trying to test out of Kvyat and Albon, who is going to be the better replacement, sorry for my throat there, for Pierre Gasly. Now, when it comes to Daniil, he is to Red Bull a known commodity. We know what Daniil is and Red Bull do with their team, but they don't know what Albon can be in the team. So that's why I think they are going to give him 9 races to prove whether he can, fight out at the top of the field and properly get enough pace out of the car. Hopefully he can, because if he can, really give it everything and perform well in the final 9 races, then it will completely transform Albon's career. It will completely transform it, because Albon a year ago wasn't even thought about in terms of getting a Formula 1 seat, and now he's in a Red Bull for the final 9 races of 2019. So if he can have great races, then he could absolutely be in that car for 2020. But if he performs how I think he will, and Daniil can beat Gasly in the final 9 races at Toro Rosso, then I think Daniil will get the seat for 2020. But it will be interesting to see, what Albon can do. Now, another 2 things to talk about with Albon is, one, the reason Helmut Marko, I think, went with Albon for the final 9 races is, again, because they want to test him out. But also, I think in terms of the reputation of the Red Bull driver program, it would be better, or a better look, if Albon was put in the car going forward into 2020 and beyond. Because, of course, Daniil is a reject from that team. He's a Red Bull reject. So it would be better reputation-wise for Red Bull with their driver program, to have Albon in the car rather than Daniil Kvyat. But also, when Pierre Gasly was announced as a Red Bull driver for 2019, the team boss, Christian Horner, said that Pierre was being promoted earlier than they would have liked to. They would have liked to have given him more time in the Toro Rosso, but they couldn't, of course, because Daniel Ricciardo left the team. Now, if Pierre was promoted too soon, and that was one of, say, the main reasons why Pierre was not ready to be in the Red Bull, then what about Albon? Because Albon has had 12 F1 races in his entire career. He's less experienced than Gasly was when he was announced as Red Bull driver for 2019. So what does that mean for Alexander Albon? If Albon also is not experienced enough, then he is also going to suffer quite a bad or damaged reputation, and he will struggle as well. So I think this is really showing up the Red Bull driver program for how they've burnt through way too many drivers, and there's not enough top level talent coming through. Albon and Kvyat are good drivers, but they're never going to be, say, race winners, world champions, drivers like that. And Red Bull, if you look at the academy right now, they're not producing talent that is capable of doing that. So I think if Albon also fails and Kvyat gets the seat for 2020, even though I think Daniil is the best option going forward, and I think Daniil absolutely does deserve to get into the Red Bull, Daniil, if he does get into the Red Bull and the Red Bull car next year is good, I still don't think Daniil is going to do enough to be, you know, winning races and be a contender for the World Championship. And I don't think, you know, he's going to be as great as Max Verstappen. So yeah, it's not a great look on the Red Bull driver program. But talking of Daniil Kvyat, let's get on to him now. Now, it is a surprise that Gasly being dropped and Daniil not being put in the team. That is a surprise for sure, because I thought Daniil has absolutely been the better driver than Albon in 2019, and I think he does deserve to be in the Red Bull car for the rest of 2019 and for 2020. But again, I think because Daniil is a known commodity to Red Bull and they know what he is, they want to test out Albon to see how good he can be in the Red Bull car and the Red Bull team. So I think that's what they're trying to do. So for Daniil, all he has to do going forward into the final 9 races is beat Pierre Gasly. That's all he has to do. If he beats Gasly and Albon doesn't do that much better than Gasly in the Red Bull, then I think Daniil absolutely will be a Red Bull driver for 2020. But if he doesn't do that and Albon does well, then I think Daniil's last chance at getting in a Red Bull is probably over. But again, he does deserve to be back in that Red Bull because he scored Toro Rosso's first podium since 2008 at Hockenheim. He has been at times consistently in the points. He finished in the points at Melbourne, Spain, Monaco, Canada, Silverstone, Hockenheim. He's been very, very strong in the races. He's definitely a better driver than he was in 2015 and 2016 and even 2017. And mentally is a lot more mature than he was when he was a Red Bull driver with Daniil Ricciardo as his teammate. So I think Daniil absolutely is still the best option for Red Bull going forward. But of course, he has not been put into the team for the rest of the season. But again, for any Kvyat fans out there, that does not mean that Daniil will not be in the Red Bull for 2020, because again, if he can beat Gasly in the final 9 races in a head-to-head and Albon does not do that well, then I think Daniil will still get the seat. So he can absolutely still get it. So definitely watch out for Daniil and Albon and of course Pierre Gasly. But what does this mean for Max Verstappen and Red Bull? Well, for Max Verstappen, it means nothing because, well, he hasn't had a teammate for this season, so it's business as usual. Yes, Albon should be an improvement, but is Albon going to be competitive with Max in the way Daniil Ricciardo was? I don't think so. I think Albon will be closer to Max than Pierre was for sure, but he won't be fighting with him for the race win or anything like that. So I think Max Verstappen will just continue as he has been for the first 12 races of the season. And for Red Bull, really, it's about for them collecting data on Albon and then comparing it to the other drivers, Kvyat and Gasly. And hopefully for Red Bull, they can make a sensible decision before the season comes to a close, because Red Bull have had a history of making rash driver decisions which in hindsight have not really worked out every single time. So hopefully at the end of the season, given the data they will have, hopefully they come to a decision which is sensible, makes sense, and is the best for the team going forward into 2020, 2021 and beyond that, because they've got to put a driver alongside Max Verstappen who is going to complement him and also do the best for the team as well. So hopefully they can do that, and hopefully Red Bull do come to the best decision. But guys, before I go on to the live chat, I just want to say, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, as I will have a Pierre Gasly video out on Wednesday, which I already scheduled it for upload on Wednesday before the news came out. I'll update you guys as to what I'm going to do differently with that video now that this news has happened. But don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you do it right there. Or go to my homepage, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and smash the like button on this video if you want to see this content continue, and also if you're liking the video. But let me know, guys, in the live chat, what is your opinion of this news, and what is your opinion of my opinion about this news? Do you agree with Pierre Gasly being dropped? Do you think Albon is the right choice going forward for the final 9 races to replace Pierre Gasly? Are you disappointed Daniil did not replace Gasly for the final 9 races? And for 2020, who do you think will be Max Verstappen's teammate? Let me know in the live chat and also the comment section if you're watching this after. And I'll make sure to get to your comments in just a moment. But I'm sure, as you guys can hear, my throat is a bit sore because I wasn't exactly expecting to do this today. So I'm going to have a quick drink, then I'll come to you guys in the chat. Right, so let's see what you guys are saying. And by the way, great to have 321 of you watching live. Great to have all of you along, and hopefully you enjoyed that 20-minute diatribe about Gasly, Kvyat, Albon, Red Bull, Verstappen, all that stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thomas Hill, I think it's hard you said Gasly has no talent. I didn't say he had no talent. I said lack of talent. That doesn't mean you don't have it. You know, when Gasly said he had a lack of grip, he's not saying he had no grip. He's just saying he didn't have enough of it. That's what lack of, I think, means in, you know, general terms. Right, let me take a look at some other comments here. Skyman says, I would have waited another 9 races and kept Gasly, giving Albon another year with Toro Rosso. He would be ready in 2021. Matt Lumsden, you don't seem to like Gasly, but I agree with your opinion and thoughts. I don't hate Pierre Gasly as a person. I have no problem with the guy as a person, but as a driver, he hasn't been good enough, and I don't like to see drivers in positions they don't deserve to be in if they're not performing to the standard expected of them in that type of car. If you're in a Red Bull, you need to be way ahead of the midfield runners, and Pierre has been a midfield runner, so that's why I've been so critical of him, because he's been in a car that he does not deserve to be in, and the longer, you know, you keep a driver in a car they don't deserve to be in, it ruins the chances for other drivers, such as Kvyat and Albon. So that's why I've been so critical of Pierre. Moving on to that picture of Albon. Let me look at some other comments here. Matthew Felton, I don't see Albon out-qualify Max. No, I don't think he will, but as long as Albon can be closer to Max than Gasly was, and again, if Albon can be 2.5 to 3.5 tenths of a second off at most of the time, then that will be good enough for me. Pierre was not doing that. Pierre, on a regular basis, was, what, 7 tenths of a second off? Sometimes a second off, and he got lapped twice. So, you know, as long as he can do better than Gasly and, again, be that kind of distance off at worst in qualifying or during a race, then I think that's good enough. Because, look, Max Verstappen is a great driver. He's a very, very quick driver. Coming into 2019, I never said that Pierre Gasly has to beat Max Verstappen or be level with him. I said that he needs to be, again, about 1/4 of a second to 3 tenths of a second off him pace-wise. But he wasn't. So he had to go. He had to go. Um, right, let me look at some other comments here from you guys. Mint says, I think Albon's a good move. He has a certain calm that Gasly lacks at the moment. Also, it can only be a confidence boost for him, absolutely. And we know from watching Formula One that drivers, once they get a confidence boost, can bring out even more performance out of them that you didn't think was actually there. So, who knows? Maybe Albon will take this and actually finish on the podium in one of his first 3 or 4 races. It could happen. You know, Singapore, Red Bull going to have a very quick car. Russia, same. So, you never know. You never know. He could have a strong start. Guy Man says, Gasly was afraid to make mistakes. What made that he made mistakes and lost speed? Lorenzo Bailey, surely Kvyat would have been the best option for now. I mean, Gasly wasn't ready after 1 year. What makes Red Bull think that Albon will be ready after half a season? Exactly. That is what I said earlier. If Red Bull thought Gasly was not ready yet to be in the Red Bull, then what makes Alexander Albon ready? It is a bit of a weird one. But again, I think they're trying to gather data on Albon so they can compare it to Daniil and Pierre. And after that, then I think they will hopefully again come to a sensible and the best decision for the team going forward. Let me just see some others here. Robert says, let me just find that. Just scrolled up. They want to see how Gasly performs against Kvyat. Then they will see who will have the seat for Red Bull in 2020. Well, I can tell you one thing. Pierre will not be getting back into that car. No way Pierre gets back into that car unless he does somehow a Daniil-esque redemption arc over the next 3 or 4 years. I don't see how Pierre gets back into that car ever again, because even though Daniil was not great, he was never that bad compared to his teammate at the time, Daniil Ricciardo. There were times where Daniil was a lot faster, but there were times where Daniil was faster and better in the races. And in 2016, Daniil had more podiums than Daniil Ricciardo, even though, of course, that was mainly because Daniil Ricciardo got a puncture in that Grand Prix. He was doing a lot better compared to Ricciardo, his teammate at Red Bull, than what Gasly was doing. So I think his reputation has been damaged a lot from the 12 races so far this season, and I don't see Pierre ever getting back into the Red Bull. I think he's absolutely done as a top-level driver. Right, let's see what you guys are saying as I scroll down. Jules Elbers, do you think Gasly will get dropped from F1 at the end of this season? And if so, who would enter Toro Rosso's seat to replace him? I think he will last. I think he'll stay in F1 for 2020 because I don't think Toro Rosso have a viable enough option for 2020. I think 2021, Toro Rosso could, put in Patricio O'Ward or someone else who's ready, a lot more ready for 2021 than 2020 to go into that car. But I think for 2020, I think it will be Gasly and, well, whoever they decide not to put in the Red Bull. But I think Gasly will be at Toro Rosso in 2020 because for the sole reason that they don't have a good enough option to replace him. But maybe they think they do. Maybe Patricio O'Ward will go into the Toro Rosso for 2020. Who knows? It could happen. But I will say, if Pierre does fall out of Formula One for 2020, I don't see how Pierre gets back into Formula One. I don't see how he does, because this season has completely destroyed his reputation. No doubt about that whatsoever. Mugen Mafia, Gasly crashing in pre-season was the start of his downfall. Absolutely. Mysterious Chris. Daniil is kind of getting old. Albon will last in more seasons than Kvyat, and that's why Red Bull made their pick. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they're just trying to compare data. I don't think it's to do with how old Daniil is, because Daniil's still at a good age for a Formula One driver, to be honest. Considering that Formula One drivers hit their peak in their early 30s, as you can see, of course, with Lewis Hamilton. Does O'Ward have enough super license points? Well, O'Ward is now in Super Formula because Dan Ticktum, thankfully that idiot Dan Ticktum got dropped because he's so bad driving wise. He was in Super Formula, but also he is a dick. O'Ward is now in Super Formula, which I think will help his points situation, and that's how Gasly, before he got into the Toro Rosso, that's how Gasly was able to stay relevant enough for the team to be in the Toro Rosso, replacing Daniil Kvyat at the end of 2017, I think. Yeah, it was. Aaron Bottas to Red Bull, I don't see it. It would be a massive surprise. You have to remember the last driver to go into the Red Bull car who was not a Red Bull Driver Academy driver was Mark Webber in 2007. So it's a long shot, but who thought Albon would be in the Red Bull for the final 9 races? Who thought this time last year Albon would be in Formula One, never mind the Red Bull? If you told me this time last year that Alex Albon would be driving for Red Bull in the final 9 races of the season, I would have said not a chance in hell. I would have said no way, Jose. But it's happened, and that just shows you how crazy Formula One is. Anything can happen in Formula One. Absolutely anything. Someone saying Vettel to go back to Red Bull. I think Sebastian will go back to Red Bull if Max is not there. If Max is at Red Bull, Sebastian will not go back, because those two cannot coexist on the track in separate teams. So how are they going to be in, the same team? That they're not going to do well as teammates at all. So I don't think Sebastian will go back to Red Bull unless Max decides to go to Ferrari or go to Mercedes, but only if Lewis Hamilton decides to retire. Shazza, what is your opinion about Dan Ticktum? Shazza, Dan is a dick. Yeah, I'll be honest, Dan Ticktum is probably the only racing driver that I do not like as a person. So I guess you could count that as hate. Yeah, Dan as a person is... Dan Ticktum as a person is not a good person. He's not. He's a crybaby. He does what failures do. He blames other people and things for their failures. That's what a failure in life does. They blame other people for their own, for their own shortcomings. And, with the way he was acting, he did not justify his talent with the way he was acting. He was acting incredibly arrogant. But the problem was he wasn't good enough to, back that up. Lewis Hamilton, for example, does have a degree of arrogance. I don't think Lewis Hamilton is an arrogant person, all in all, but he does have a degree of arrogance in him. But Lewis Hamilton, justifies that with being the best driver in Formula One and being one of the best drivers of all time. If you look at the majority of the best Formula One drivers of all time, most of them are dicks in some way, shape or form. Michael Schumacher was, Ayrton Senna was, Alain Prost was a bit. Who else? Fernando Alonso, of course. It's kind of a trait that you have with top drivers, but the problem with Dan was he wasn't good enough to justify it. So that's why I didn't like him as a driver, and as a person I just found him unbearable to witness what he was doing. And thankfully, thankfully he is not going to be in the Toro Rosso or in Formula One, because he would be awful. Right, let me take a look at some final few comments. I will come off soon, guys, because this is a bit of an impromptu stream, and for the people watching after, I don't want this to be a too long of a stream. But yeah. Let me look at some other comments. Little Light, all big drivers are arrogant, but they need to justify it and also should try to be decent on camera. Again, yeah, it's not even in Formula One. If you look at sports, all big sportsmen have arrogance to them or have a bit of a swagger, like Michael Jordan, for example. He could be a bit of a dick, but he was the best basketball player of all time, so he justified it. And so have plenty of other sportsmen. If you're going to be arrogant, justify it with talent. If you can't justify it with talent, then don't bother being an arrogant dick. That's the problem with Dan Tickdom. Right. Let me find, and yet, by the way, I think I was sick. 254 just said Verstappen has that quality in him. Yes, he does. He absolutely does. And that's why Max is probably going to be a world champion and a great driver in the future, because he has that arrogance and can justify it with his own talent. Right. Let me find two more comments, and then I will come to the end of the stream. By the way, thank you to EZ. No problem. Mostly an F1 fan. Says Sainz to finish 6th in the championship. Yeah, I think he will, because the McLaren will be good enough for the final 9 races, and Albon only has 17 points, and I don't think Albon will get enough to beat Sainz, but I think Albon will definitely finish in the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship, because he will be in the Red Bull for the rest of the season. And let me find one final comment. Let me just find one final good one from you guys. I'm just trying to find a very good comment to finish on, because you guys are putting so many, but it is hard to find that one final good one. You guys are bringing up examples of people that are dicks, but justify it. Let me find one final comment. I'm just trying to see. Right, let me end off with Skyman, who says Mercedes would have got Verstappen as he left Red Bull after this season. They want him more than anyone else. Well, because of the Red Bull car being good enough to keep Max in the Red Bull, I don't think that'll happen for next year. But if the Red Bull is not good enough for Max in 2020 to at least contend for the World Championship, then I think Max will probably try to leave for 2021, because he is so good. And if he does get into the right car at the right time, then it's good night for everyone else. But going forward, of course, for the final 9 races, his teammate will be Alexander Albon, who, of course, as you can see there, and if there was, say, a live reaction from Alexander Albon in terms of his facial expression, it would be this from Albon, and also this, because Albon is a very, nice person, very happy guy, and I'm sure he'll be elated as he is in this photo. But for Gasly, I think there's only one picture that describes him in the last few hours. Unfortunately, Pierre's career at Red Bull is firmly dead. But guys, that has been it for this stream and this video. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this news, and what do you think about my opinion of what I've had to say about this news, and about Gasly, Albon, Kvyat, Red Bull, Verstappen, Dan Tickdom, all of that. Let me know in the comments. Again, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, and click my channel name. Go to my homepage, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell, and as well smash the like button for more content like this. Just to let you guys know, the next video coming up on the channel is Wednesday, and it will be a Pierre Gasly video. What it was supposed to be was why Pierre Gasly should be dropped part 2, but of course the news that Gasly's been dropped has affected things. So what I'm going to do is leave the video as it is, but what I will do is put a disclaimer at the start saying this video was made before, so-and-so news, and also I will put a different title for it, such as Why Gasly Got Dropped, because definitely I think the final 5 races of his reign as a Red Bull driver massively contributed to him getting dropped. So that's what's coming up on Wednesday. But also, I did upload a video earlier, guys, and it was a classic incident analysis of Ayrton Senna versus Alain Prost from their controversial crashes at Suzuka in 1989 and 1990. So if you haven't seen it, make sure to do so. Link below in the description. And also, my Why Pierre Gasly Should Be Dropped video from a couple months ago is also in the description down below, where you can witness how bad he was in the first 7 races. And also, I would like to say, or kind of take credit for being the first person on this website to get on the Gasly Should Be Dropped train, because I saw this coming in terms of him not being good enough a mile off, and I've been saying it for 2 months that he should be dropped, and thankfully Red Bull have seen the light. So don't forget to check all that out and be around for Wednesday to continue to share your thoughts about Pierre Gasly and his failed Red Bull career. And also, don't forget to join the Discord, link below in the description. That's the best place for notifications of my videos and streams. And also, when it comes to breaking F1 news or race weekends, it's a great place to be because we're always up to date and chatting and stuff like that. So don't forget to join that. And also, follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110 and check out my website, chazahd.com, for more content like this. And also, new plug, on Facebook, make sure to check out ChazahDF1 on Facebook, because I do have a Facebook page. Make sure to go and like it. That would be great if you could. But guys, that has been it for today about this news. Albon replacing Gasly. And until next time, it has been me, ChazahD. Goodbye.